Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So much of what I share here on our YouTube channel is based off of our unique experience and what works well for us here at Two Sisters Flower Farm. And I know at times that may leave you wondering, well, will the same process work for me and for my circumstances? You see, I think it is so easy, especially in the flower farming world, to just copy what everyone else is doing. After all, if it works well for them, then it's got to work for us too, right? While that may be true at times, that logic doesn't track in every single circumstance. And that's why if there's one thing that I hope that you're able to glean from these videos that I share here on our channel, it's that I want you to understand my thought process behind how I make certain decisions so that you can determine whether or not these same practices will work for you and for your farm. Specifically in this video, I want to break down the decision to start seeds indoors and help you decide if it's worth it for you. So before you go buy all the grow lights and the wire racks, let's dissect this topic a bit further. You guys know the drill by now. If you're ready, let's go. Okay, so despite what other flower farmers may tell you, starting seeds indoors is not a requirement for having a beautiful, thriving flower garden. Now, that being said, I will tell you that here at Two Sisters Flower Farm, the vast majority of what we plant in our annual cut flower field is either plugs that we buy from a wholesale grower or transplants that we have grown ourselves using a simple seed starting setup right here in my little farmhouse kitchen. So why exactly do we invest in seed starting equipment and spend time caring for and fussing over tiny seedling plants well before it's warm enough to actually grow things outside? The biggest advantage for us is that seed starting indoors gives us a jump on the season and allows us to have a longer window of harvest for our flowers. For a flower farm like us that relies on the income that is produced from the sale of our flowers, having more time to sell more flowers, well, that additional income is greater than the time and money that we spend on the front end of our season tending to those seeds indoors. And so for us, and again I want to emphasize for us, starting seeds indoors before the season gets underway, it is worth it. Now that seemed like a long-winded answer to a rather simple question, so let's illustrate what I'm really talking about with an example. And let's use zinnias in this example as they're such a staple in our summer cutting garden. Now, if you were to look at the back of any seed packet, you'll find listed on it the days to maturity or the days to harvest. This number, it represents on average the number of days that it will take for your plant to grow to maturity. That is to actually flower and produce blooms. Now, because Mother Nature can affect the speed at which flowers grow, this number it's sometimes expressed as a range, sometimes not always. What this means is that under ideal conditions, when heat-loving zinnias are grown with plenty of light and warmth, it should take them at minimum 75 days to reach a harvestable stage. Now, if the temperatures drop and maybe your plants have to endure some cooler weather, they may be delayed with their flowering, and at times, zinnias may take up to 90 days to begin producing flowers for you. Either way, your zinnia should bloom somewhere between that 75 to 90 day window. Knowing this information, we can assume that if we were to direct sow zinnia seeds in our garden after our last frost date, because remember, zinnias are tender annuals, meaning that they cannot tolerate cold, then approximately 75 to 90 days after our last frost date, we should expect to see our zinnias starting to bloom. Here in West Michigan, where I'm located, we are considered Zone 5B, and so our last frost date usually occurs May 15th. Planting zinnia seeds directly into our garden around that May 15th last frost date means that our first zinnias won't likely start blooming till July 29th at the earliest. Now, there's nothing wrong with not having flowers until late July. But the other piece of the puzzle that we have to consider is our first frost date at the end of the season. So for us, again in Zone 5B, our first frost date happens around October 15th. Zinnias are a cut and come again type flower where the more that you cut from them, the more they will produce. In an ideal situation, we can assume that our zinnias will continue to produce until our first frost that takes them out in October. So from that July 29th date that I mentioned earlier to October 15th, we have approximately 78 days or 11 weeks where we can expect zinnias to be in bloom. For a lot of flower farmers, that 78-day window, that might be long enough for them to be able to harvest and sell flowers to the point where they can make a sufficient income. And this only works to prove my point that I made at the start of this video when I said that starting seeds indoors is not a requirement for flower farming. So let me explain what we ourselves gain by starting our seeds indoors. Again, if you were to reference the back of your seed packet, you should find a line that reads something along the lines of start seeds indoors in trays 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost. Zinnias are relatively fast growing, so this information is essentially letting us know that it's going to take between 4 and 6 weeks for us to grow a seedling that is large enough to be transplanted outside. What we really want is for our zinnia seed to germinate and then put on enough growth so that it has 3 to 4 sets of true leaves. This is going to ensure that our transplant has the greatest chance of survival. So getting our zinnia seedling to size is going to take 4 to 6 weeks. When we start seeds indoors, this 4 to 6 week process is generally done while it's still too cold to plant anything outdoors. Like I've said, our last frost date is May 15th, which means that we start our zinnia seeds indoors approximately 4 weeks earlier on April 15th. And so by May 15th, we can have a seedling that is ready to go into the garden. And since that plant start has already completed some of its growth indoors, we get to subtract that growing period from the days to maturity. So our zinnia seedling, since it's been given a head start, it won't need 75 days to fully mature. It will only require about an additional 50 days of growth before blooming. So if we compare that to the seeds that we sow directly into the garden, they'll bloom around July 29th, but our zinnias that were started indoors would likely bloom much sooner, around July 4th, give or take some days. For us and how our farm operates, having flowers in bloom earlier in the summer is beneficial to us as it allows us to welcome visitors to our U-pick garden sooner. It gives us a longer window of harvest for our flowers so that we can sell more bouquets, and it gives us a little separation between our summer and our fall season. In the fall, our focus is on selling our potted mums and heirloom pumpkins, and it's nice when our seasons aren't on top of one another, as it helps us to spread out the workload. As you can see with just these few reasons that I just mentioned, the idea of worth and seed starting is very dependent on your situation. I am a firm believer that you always have to do what works best for you. So as you decide what is the better option for you, let me give you a few other things to consider. For one, seed starting indoors, it may allow you to grow a greater variety of flowers, especially if you experience a shorter growing season. For us, our frost-free growing season, the time of the year when we can grow our tender annuals outside, that occurs between May 15th and October 15th, giving us 153 days of warm season growing. If we were only to direct seed our flowers, we would have to be sure to plant seeds that take less than 150 days to mature. So eucalyptus, which often takes 150 plus days to mature, we wouldn't be able to grow that here. Some celosia varieties and even snapdragons can be incredibly slow growing, taking between 120 to 130 days to mature. So while we could technically sow these varieties directly into the ground, it may not be the wisest financial move, as the flowering window may be too short to allow us to earn any substantial return on investment. Another advantage to seed starting indoors is that we're often rewarded with better germination. You see, starting your seeds indoors in a controlled environment It means that you can give those seeds exactly what they need to thrive. You have control over how much light that they receive. You can control the temperature that your seeds are exposed to, as you can easily increase or reduce the temperature of your grow room. And you can even use supplement heat with a heat mat or a small greenhouse heater if need be. If your growing environment is too dry, you could easily place a humidity dome over your seed trays to ensure that your seeds have enough moisture. Overall, there's a lot of variables that you can account for when you start your seeds indoors. This is why I especially enjoy starting very tiny seeds indoors. Think snapdragons, celosia, any herbs, etc. Growing these tiny seeds in a protected environment ensures that they're not washed away by heavy rains or picked up and taken away by the wind. They truly have a better chance of making it all the way to harvest. Now, one last consideration I want to mention is that planting transplants, seeds that you start indoors, can help you maintain better weed control. Especially if you're not using any sort of weed barrier in your garden, planting an established seedling versus a seed, it gives your flowers a head start over any weeds that may form. If your flowers can outpace the weeds, then with any luck, they'll shade out any of the weeds that do manage to grow and help alleviate some of the maintenance that your flower garden may require. Just something to think about. Okay, you guys, as you can see, there are advantages and disadvantages to both methods of growing flowers, both starting your seeds indoors and direct sowing them into your garden. And after watching this video, I hope that you can understand that there is not a one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to starting seeds. Ultimately, I hope that you take this information and use it to decide on a growing practice that will work best for you and for your unique circumstances. I'd actually really love to know what you decide, so let me know in the comments below what you're planning on doing this season. Now, if you're looking for tips on how to set up your own seed starting space in your home, I encourage you to check out this video right here. It's from last year and I was even more awkward back then in front of the camera, but the information is still accurate. If you're wanting just the links to where I purchased my own equipment, I will also link a blog post in the description box below that lists everything that I use. And check the full description box because I do try and link my favorite tools and equipment in every single video description. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like me to share more content like I shared today, let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. And please consider subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. It really does help us out. Now, that is all for me today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. And as always, I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye, guys.